It troubles me that many activist groups who oppose America's civilizational ethos consistently claim the moral high ground, but are not adequately opposed in doing so. And many of my brethren on the right who seek to defend American civilization do so wrongly by, instead of going towards where the claims of these groups rest, they decide to beat them over the head with logic, facts, data, and statistics. And yet, when these tactics do not work, and these groups continue to gain adherents, they continue to gain cultural popularity, they continue to gain influence, there is no massive reevaluation. And the primary issue is this, my friends. The right has largely ceded the ground of sentiment and emotion, and then therefore their effect, which is expression, towards the left, and has tried to fight them on a plane that many of these activist groups don't even consider a valid plane to be fighting any kind of cultural battle on. And until we reclaim sentiment, until we reclaim emotion, and show how these things can be used to build civilization, show how these things can be used to conserve American society, and show how these things can be used to enhance our perception of our own moral duties as citizens, they will continue to persist in what I call the tyranny of expression, and they will continue to be weaponized against people who do not wish to go along with the project of the cultural vanguard. So, in this video, my friends, I will be explaining and showing how these activist groups use the moral high ground and they claim sentiment and they use it as a weapon to advance their goals. And then I will also be explaining and arguing why the right should reclaim the territory of sentiment, reclaim the territory of expression, and then convert it into a way of actually making our pursuit of civilizational defense all the more better in its quality. But before we do that, my friends, I hope all of you are doing well. I am Christian Watson. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoy political and social commentary with a philosophical bent, then I must implore you, please like, share, comment, subscribe. Do whatever you can, my friends, to ensure that this message is successful. My friends, this is a civic revivalist project, a civic repair project. If you believe the fundamental philosophical character of the American experiment is worth preserving, and not just preserving, but pushing forth into the modern society with moral clarity and philosophical rigor, then this channel is for you. If you believe America and all of her greatness deserves a better quality of defenders from all of the vitriol, bile, and nonsense that she constantly gets from her adversaries, this is the channel for you. My friends, like, share, comment, subscribe. Thank you guys so much for being here. Now, please enjoy the video. So, as I mentioned, the ground of sentiment has largely been claimed by many activist groups, especially many activist groups on the left, and this has allowed them to ascend in a powerful way and create so much cultural capital on their part, where any attempt to oppose them is seen as opposing the lives of those who they profess to be defending. And I think there's a few examples of this in practical terms. Look at, for example, the protests that have been happening this summer as of the posting of this video. Look at, for example, the anti-ICE protests. The anti-ICE protests, many of them claim that what is happening when illegal immigrants get deported is that a cruel act, a lack of compassion is happening towards people who were here peacefully, even if they were not here legally, and therefore they should not be deported because deportation is cruel. They're claiming the moral high ground by claiming being against deportation is therefore being against cruelty. But in all reality, deportation is the only means that a society can use to preserve itself from the cruelty of those that violate its principles, that violate its laws, that violate its norms, and violate its standards, and seek to then therefore exist in the society against it and on their own terms. That is actually quite cruel because that violates the moral rule of fidelity. And deportation, if it truly is used to punish those who came in illegally, if it truly is used to punish those, forget about legally or illegally, because legally and illegally are a matter of process. And as conservatives, as people on on the right, we need to get beyond process arguments, because the process can change, but moral truth does not change. Moral truth and moral substance do not change. So instead of viewing immigration as a matter of legality or illegality, let's instead view it as a matter of as a morally substantive matter. So even people that do not hold the values of your country and dislike your country, if they get deported, it's being seen as somehow cruel, when in all reality, this is the only way to ensure your civilization is not eroded. And also, it's actually quite dignified to deport people, because dignity simply rests in giving people what they deserve. And if someone violated the rule of fidelity, they deserve to face consequences, because responsibility must guide our actions. So again, that issue is distorted. Then you have the Antifa people that say any policy that they don't like is fascist, without actually giving forth a substantive evaluation of fascism, without actually understanding that fascism is what I say it's metaphysics meets politics. It is essentially a political religion that the vast majority of people who claim something is fascism are actually ascribing a category error to it, because fascism today, in its purest form, is not really a thing too much anymore, especially not in American society. Then you have, of course, Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter whole claim is that they were attempting to repair the hundreds of years of damage done to Black people that continues, in their eyes, to persist into the modern day. So anyone who opposed them was therefore opposing the betterment of Black people, even though there were several things that happened with Black Lives Matter on an organizational level that brought their propriety into question. But not only that, there were things baked into the philosophy of the organization that also brought the notion of them possibly helping Black people into question, like, for example, attempting to pose Marxism as some kind of policy prescription, or like, for example, attempting to categorize the issue of race as an antagonistic matter, rather than dealing first with the fact that as citizens in society, we have a commonality that transcends race, and therefore that should be our starting point, although that would be far too unifying for a group that seeks to divide. Again, all of these groups claim the moral high ground, and all of these arguments I just made against them actually don't matter. Well, they matter because the truth matters, but why don't they matter in terms of countering the cultural influence? Because every argument I made against them is not fighting on the terrain those groups fight on. They fight on the terrain of sentiment. And they have used sentiment to block out any kind of logical objection and to win the hearts of so many different people. That's why I say, my friends, it's not enough to create a culture of the mind. You have to also have a strong culture of the heart. A culture of the heart is this formation within yourself that goes towards the seat of your heart and then balances what is right and what is wrong, and then uses your affections to understand those things and to appreciate those things on a level that is much deeper than just you thinking about them. You have to also feel them. But the right has for so long rejected this process and has always particularly gone to the thinking level in the cultural battle, and they've ignored the feeling level. In fact, they've even said, many people have even said, the left is so emotional, they don't think in facts and logic. One of the most destructive ideas to ever grace contemporary political conversation is the notion that facts don't care about your feelings. That's one of the most destructive ideas ever. Because whereas facts, if you're going to assign to them a personal quality of care, which itself is, my opinion, a category error, it should not at all be assigned. It should not be assigned by any thinking person. But let's assume that that doesn't exist. Facts, if we are deciding that quality, may not care about your feelings. But your feelings certainly care about your facts. And our feelings are going to approach how we contextualize facts, how we understand facts, and most importantly, how we use facts. Man does not just think, he also feels. And to neglect the emotional and sentimental part of man in pursuit of this hyper-logical part of man is to try to flatten his nature to fit some kind of image that actually is divorced from who man is. And that is why these activist groups have had so much success. Because you've got one side, roughly speaking, generally speaking, fighting with a flat understanding of human nature, purely logic, and the other side actually using what tends to win people before logic even gets in the equation, and that is sentiment and feeling, and then weaponizing that into successful political and cultural capital. That's why, to someone who has a perception that America is inherently a racist country, regardless of the falsehood of that claim, Black Lives Matter speaks more to them than the person bringing out the statistics that show all these good things happening to black people. That's why to a person that dislikes someone like Donald Trump, Antifa speaks more to them than somebody that can actually point out some of the things that Trump may have done that are beneficial. That's why to somebody who has a soft, bleeding heart for immigrants, the anti-ICE people speak more to them than someone that actually makes the moral argument based in fidelity. Because it's not about your facts. It's first about our sentiments. In a society where sentiment is not formed right, is a society where the passions tyrannize you and expression itself becomes a tyranny, because expression blocks out your ability to think about things substantively and instead keeps you in a place where you think about things only within your own limitations as a human being. What does thinking do, my friends? Thinking allows us to expand our own limitations by applying our minds to the external world. But our sentiments, divorced from thinking, has nothing beyond ourselves to latch onto. So therefore, we essentially imprison ourselves into ourselves when we exist on a level solely of emotion and sentiment, and we operate without any ability to truly know anything beyond how we feel. And this is how expression tyrannizes us. Now, there's two forms of expression, my friends, because we have to actually get into the nature of expression here in order to see how it can be used for good. There's refined expression and there's unrefined expression. I call it raw expression, like raw material before it's cultivated into something that's useful. Raw expression is like a scream. It's like this sort of unshaped way of bringing forth something, about bringing forth your thoughts, bringing forth your speaking, something of that sort. So raw expression means it would be a scream, a yell, a punch, punching the wall, things like that. That's unrefined expression. Refined expression would be like singing a song according to a song sheet, playing an instrument according to the music sheet in front of you, building something with more than just an unction of what you're going to build, with a blueprint. These are refined expression. Well, if sentiment is not checked by reason, it cannot be refined. But not only that, but if sentiment is not checked by reason and in itself is not refined, it can only exist on the first level. And therefore, you will get people, this is why these various shouting matches you see at these culturally significant protests happen. It's why when you see an Antifa protest or you see an immigrant protest, there's a lot of screaming, a lot of shouting, not a lot of thinking, because a lot of those people, on both sides, by the way, but especially amongst those who are the evangelists for the activist cause, only exist on the level of unrefined expression and don't have the ability to articulate beyond that because their standard isn't contain N-words and they're being tyrannized by their passion. They cannot think, they can only feel, but they think through feeling. And that is the problem. So how do we fix this? We have to fix this by considering how sentiment, when it is refined and it is considered significant in its own way, feeds into three separate things. Number one, how sentiment and feeling help us perceive our moral duties as members of society and civilization. Number two, how sentiments play in our formation as citizens. And of course, number three, the role sentiments play in our ability to understand the world and society. So if man is not just a thinking being, but he's also a feeling being, that means our affections can actually help us throughout the course of our life. And oftentimes it's our affections that move us before our mind moves us. If you, for example, were to hear about your friend getting into a bad car accident, even before your mind it does anything, your affection for him brings forth this form of disgust, horror, shock, if he truly is your friend. If you're just using him, that might be a different story. But if he's truly your friend, and that then therefore moves you, and your mind follows after that. Even in a case like that, sentiment moves first, the mind moves second. But in order for that sentiment to be productive, the mind must be active. But it's not the mind that moved you, it's your feeling for your friend that moved you. This is called your moral sense. And Lord Kames, who is a great philosopher, one of my favorite philosophers, said in his Essays on the Principles of Morality and Natural Religion that our moral sense is the intuitive feeling that we have within ourselves that allows us to understand what is morally right, what is morally wrong before we even get to the level of thinking. And therefore, our reason is an aid to the moral sense. The reason does not form the moral sense, so to speak. So if our moral sense can can get us towards a place where we're caring for our friends, or where we have this inherent reaction that then prompts inaction in us towards those we love. It can then get us into a place where we can fulfill our moral duties beyond our circle, beyond our friends, according to first principles. If I have a love for justice, even though justice itself is a duty that does not require me to love it, it is still a duty that I am bound to do. I am still bound to refrain from harming persons, property, breaking my promises, and all that kind of stuff. I'm bound to do that. But if I have a love for justice, not only will I be bound to do it, I'll be more likely to endeavor in the habits that make justice more prevalent in the hearts and actions of other people. If I have a love for fidelity, not only, even though I'm bound to do it, I have a sensibility that is going to produce more sensibilities in the hearts of others, which teaches them the virtue of loyalty. If I have a love for truth, even though I'm bound to be truthful by virtue of the fact that a society that is unjust cannot survive, a society that does not have fidelity cannot survive, a society that lacks truth cannot survive, then I am going to encourage within the people a profound love of truth that will motivate their tongues to speak truth and to avoid falsehood. If I have a love for it, because my understanding of it goes from merely an intellectual level to an affectionate level, and how we deal with things affectionately are different than how we deal with things intellectually. And guess what? Civilizations are not sustained solely on the intellectual. They have to exist on the affectionate, which is one of the reasons why the intellectual can be used to destroy civilization in the name of progress. The intellectual can be used to destroy civilization in the name of progress. It has been. Because it's unmoored from proper ordering within sentiment. So if the love of first principles, the love of morally right duties, the love of moral rules, the love of these things produces affections in the hearts of other people to do them, it perpetuates them, and it creates a culture of the heart that foments them before our minds even get to it. And that means, as citizens, because to be a citizen is to have some, first of all, to be a citizen is to be someone who has fidelity. That's the first thing. Second thing, but to be a citizen in the American sense is to be someone who carries upon their back the whole intellectual heritage, the whole cultural heritage bequeathed from the founders that makes our country possible and perpetuates our country towards posterity. As the founders knew that America was a project. It wasn't just a static country that existed in the 18th century. It was a project that had to be perpetuated by the active wills of the people and a posture towards government. So if you guys don't realize how significant this is, if I can love morally right behavior, if I can love first principles, if I can love justice, if I can love truth, I can then love my country, but not in a parochial way where I love my country, but in a way where I understand that my duty as a citizen it stands at a crossroads where I am part of the generation that actually is responsible for if my country survives in the first place. And like a mother cares for their child, that produces a certain kind of affection for your country that then that makes you think about it and see it in a very different light than if you simply had an indifferent, apathetic, or uninformed view of your country. Again, the sentiment, train towards the right, train towards what matters, train towards what is true and what is good. That is actually what produces a desire within you to sustain your civilization. Then, of course, there's a third level of perception. I'm laughing because we don't hear this kind of talk too often. We hear facts and logic and emotion over here, but no, it's a bound relationship, people. It's not separate. It's not separate. And the people who told you they were separate, I would not believe they have any more credibility because they don't understand human nature as it is. They may have some mythical version that they invented in their imagination to craft some system that appeases their vain idea of what it means to be human, but they do not know what it actually is. So, if our sentiments can make us love our country better, they can make us pursue our moral duties better, they can make us better as citizens, they can also help how we understand the world. A disordered sentiment can affect your perception of the world, your outlook on life. This is what despair is. I made a video about despair recently. Despair is that feeling that casts a shadow over your mind and saps your energy, your creativity. It saps so many things that are oftentimes used towards productive behavior, used towards fulfilling your moral duties, used towards actually existing in life and self-preservation, and instead brings them into this place where you are led to believe that everything is meaningless, which is called nihilism, or that everything is dark and gloomy, which is called depression, or that everything is against you, which is called cynicism, and despair unites these things. So an unordered sentiment can produce despair, and despair does not only does that make you a bad citizen, most importantly, but it makes it impossible to be a moral agent, because why would you proceed any moral behavior if everything is meaningless, if everything is dark, or if everything is against you? You can't, because you have an antagonistic view towards what man requires to be sustained in life as a rightly ordered person. So despair can seep in. Envy can seep in. Envy is the corrosive acid that destroys social relationships, because envy, rather than having goodwill towards your fellow person, envy actually seeks the destruction of your fellow person because you covet something that they have that you may want to have, which then leads me to believe you have a poor value of yourself, a low estimation of yourself, which goes back to the problem of disordered sentiments. So again, if your sentiments are rightly ordered, your perception of the world will be rightly ordered as well. Because a bad sentiment, a bad emotion can cloud our view of the world, but a good one can enhance our view of the world. But a good one can also blind us to the darknesses of life, which is why, in the hope of being optimistic, be realistically optimistic. Don't be imaginatively optimistic, where you are seeing positivity where you should perhaps see something else. Don't deny reality, but also don't have it cast a shadow over reality. Because when you cast a shadow over something, you cannot see it in its fullest extent. The sunlight, no matter whether you hate the sun or whether you love the sun, the sunlight gives you the ability to objectively assess everything around you, good and bad. So we ought to have an idea of sunlight and clarity. And that clarity comes when we order our sentiments. So how does this translate into the activist movements? As I mentioned, the activist movements keep people captured by binding their heart with raw expression, by binding their heart with unrefined sentiments that not only are divorced from any kind of a reason, which is one offense, but they're also divorced from any kind of well-formed sentiment, which is another offense, meaning the sentiments cannot do what they're supposed to do, which is enhance our ability to be moral people, enhance our ability to be good citizens, enhance our ability to be moral agents, enhance our ability to live productive lives, enhance our ability to be rightly ordered. The sentiments, when they're not refined, can only keep us in the same place we started by imprisoning us within ourselves and then throwing expression, throwing the passions over us as a veil and then tyrannizing us. The tyranny of expression exists when we mistake sentiment for something incorrect, when it's weaponized for political purposes or for social purposes, and when it is not seen as the handmaiden of moral duty as opposed to its enemy, as the handmaiden of truth as opposed to its enemy. The conservative, my friend, will not run from emotion. He will not detest emotion. He will not spit at emotion. The conservative will understand emotion, want to order it well, want to direct it well, want to feed it into the moral imagination, which will then produce rightly ordered conduct that makes not only the society he wishes to conserve better, not only the civilization that he loves more enhanced, but also the people within it. It makes their conduct all the more righteous according to the first principles that are required to sustain society, according to the truths of the natural law that all of us as human beings are bound by being human beings. That's the disposition of the conservative. And anyone who tells you that we ought to avoid emotion, or emotion is just negotiable, or facts over feelings or whatever, watch that person and also ask that person a question. If facts don't care about my feelings, then how come my feelings seem to have a lot of idea about my facts? And then how come my feelings actually get me first before the facts even do? Perhaps it's not a tension between facts and feelings. Perhaps there can be an alignment between facts and feelings that make all of us not only feel better, but think better. Not only think better, but do better. And not only do better, but live better as Americans, as Westerners, as patriots. That's the disposition that I'm in, my friends. And I would encourage all of you, humble opinion, to be in the same mentality. My friends, like, share, comment, subscribe. Do whatever you can, my friends. Let us fight the tyranny of expression. Let us fight unordered sentiments. Let us give love to greatly ordered sentiments. Let us understand the tensions between human nature and how to harmonize, most importantly. Be sure also to donate to me if you wish. I am a young creator, but I'm also a creator that needs some help. I want to get the message out there. I want to be a voice on the front lines, and I can only do that if you guys help me. Thank you guys so much. If this video inspired you, or any of the words you heard in this video inspired you, my friends, join the Pensive cohort. It is my collection of young thinkers that are studying right now as we speak. We are studying the thinkers, foundational thinkers that actually influenced the founding of America, both intimately and non-intimately, and we're applying the principles that they birthed up into our cultural discourse. And I believe once more of us do this, we're going to have a revival in this country, an intellectual revival in this country, one that actually repairs and makes our country better. My friends, study history, study philosophy, remain morally convicted, and please, I beg of you, you better stay pensive. Good night, my friends. Bye.